Application state can help so that components can share data, but as said, that data is in memory and will be lost once we refresh the app. Let's now add another layer of working with data, and it is storing data locally. Before we look at how we can store any data persistently, let's learn about a problem we may have with our application. Say that in our Blazor app, we have the employee overview and the employee detail. The user that is working with the app will first navigate to the overview. That'll trigger an HTTP GET request to be sent to the API to get back all employees. Then they navigate to the details page of an employee with ID 3. A new API call is done to retrieve those details. Next, the user goes back to the overview, and again another API call to get all employees is launched. That is the same one as we had done seconds ago. Aren't we stressing the API this way? What if we, when we retrieve the list of employees the first time, store that locally? Then we still go out to the API for the details, but when we then arrive again on the overview page, we're going to get the data from the local store. Yes, it works a bit like a cache, and of course we'll need a way to make sure that the data isn't stale. But the general idea here is that we can store data locally and thus reduce the amount of calls to our API. Storing data in the browser isn't a Blazor thing. It's a browser API that comes with modern browsers. In regular web applications, we can use JavaScript to interact with this data storage. It's known as session storage and local storage. Local storage is really persistent storage inside of the browser, and it's bound to a domain. That data is persistent, and thus even after closing the browser, that data is still there. It's also shared across tabs or windows as long as you're working with an app on a certain domain. Session storage, on the other hand, is shorter lived. It will allow us to store data too, but the data is cleared when the browser session ends. That means that after the browser restarts, the data will be gone. This may be what you want, in fact, for security reasons. The good news is that this is also usable from Blazor. It is not a native Blazor feature, but Blazor can talk with JavaScript, and we can access both local and session storage. We'll see in a later module how we can manually interrupt with JavaScript to perform certain functionalities. Some popular ones, like local storage, have however been wrapped in packages that we can use directly. Under the covers, JavaScript is used, but we don't even notice. The Blazor local storage package is a very useful package that allows us to store data and retrieve it later on. Like with pretty much everything, before we start using this package, we need to register it in the services collection. I'll show this in the demo. Once that is done, through dependency injection, we can inject an instance of the iLocal storage service, and that has methods to store data and read data. On the slide here, we'll see that we are going to try to retrieve a string using getItemAsync, passing in the key. So employee first name. In this case, we are retrieving a string, but think back of what I said earlier about reducing API calls. We can indeed, using the exact same approach, store the data returned from the API in local storage for later use. We can even add like an expiration time. And when that is over, we will fetch new data from the API and store it again. That is in fact what we'll do in the upcoming demo. To work with local storage, there are some APIs built in. setItem and the async version setItemAsync allow us to store a value in local storage. A key will be assigned to later on be able to retrieve it. Getting the value based on the key is done using getItem and getItemAsync. There's also a way to check for the presence of a key. For that we use the contain key and contain key async. And removing an item is possible using, surprise surprise, remove item and remove item async.